Hello, and welcome to this presentation on learning analytics. What is learning analytics? Well, learning analytics is the process of analyzing huge amounts of student data and using that information to make changes in instruction and help improve student achievement. The biggest benefit is for the individual student, but learning analytics has the potential to impact education at every single level. So wait, what exactly is it again? Well, let's use a general, non-education example to begin with. In the past 2 decades, as consumers began shopping online, companies began having access to data on consumer spending habits that they never had before. The term data mining was coined because the companies had so much data, they needed to analyze it and mine the useful information out of it so they can make predictions about consumer spending. Now imagine applying that idea to education. In the old system, students learn all year long and then take a series of grade level tests issued by the state in May. This means that data was collected once a year, in bulk, and then processed. But right now, we're at an amazing time since we can actually collect and process data on a minute-by-minute basis. That's simply incredible. Now, online games like Kahoot are fun for students, but they also have the ability to record and store all the answers for an entire class. Again, this simply is impossible for a single teacher to do, but a computer can do it in the background without any extra work from the teacher. But a ton of data is completely useless unless we can mine something useful out of it. That's where learning analytics comes into play. According to the Horizon report by the New Media Consortium, the data that is collected could be used at all levels within a school or a district. At the student level, lessons can be tailored to the individual student based on the question and answer data, and what they're answering correctly can lead to tougher questions, whereas things that are answered incorrectly can lead to a redirection of their path of learning. At the teacher level, lesson planning could be dramatically changed as the teacher had real data immediately. Teacher would spend less time grading and be allowed more time for planning. Student groups could be easily assembled based on the data that they're receiving right that day. At the district level, budget decisions could now be based on real data. Data can be chopped and sorted by any different subgroup you like. Want to look up all the students who are in 9th grade and who happen to spend more than 1 week on topic 3 in Algebra 1, for example? No problem. This simply could not be done a few years ago if we had to pull everything by hand. The records weren't organized that way. So why is this important? Well, for a moment, please think back on your time as a student. Think back to a particular subject where you got frustrated or stuck, whether it was chemistry, math, Spanish, or whatever. Imagine that the lesson stopped and redirected you and gave you a short tutorial. How much better would that have been? Would you have continued on that subject? Or imagine that you're working on a math problem for more than a few minutes and making no progress. What if your computer recognized that and asked you if you needed help? These features are already embedded in many video games, and there's a reason for that. The developers want the players to continue to the end. This idea was explored with a program called the Pangea Learning that was implemented for a few years at my school where I'm working. The program had built-in tutorials, but what set it apart was the option of a live tutor to chat with and help you. This was great, but as you can imagine, it was expensive and most schools could not afford it, or if they could, it was only for a very limited number of students. So imagine, if we could take the benefits of that model and have it built into the software. What if we can monitor data from millions of students across the United States and use that data to make improvements to the program? That's all possible, thanks to learning analytics. Now, all of that sounds great, but I'm sure there's some skeptics watching this presentation, and I want to address their concerns as well. So, what are the downsides? Well, there certainly is the possibility of collecting huge amounts of data on every student in America. But why is that bad? Well, if you ever tried to apply for a home loan, you'll know that everything is tied to your credit score. There's certainly a risk of this happening for students. Instead of a credit score, they might have an EduScore, based on the data that was collected from kindergarten through college. It'd be like having your IQ come up when someone Googles your name. But that's not necessarily bad, is it? Well, imagine not having to spend countless hours on college applications, since colleges could now sort through the data and find their perfect student in order to make up the freshman class of their university. Or perhaps, companies might find their future employees by searching through this data. But what if the method being used for the analytics is flawed? Well, this certainly is a possibility, but it's something that can be adjusted and corrected as we move into the future.
created using Powtoon.